Have the pleasure of moderating this, which is great because nuclear waste is one of my favorite topics, which makes me just a gas at parties. ECA was originally founded by the communities that were hosting DOE's federal nuclear facilities, and cleanup was our mission, making sure that the local voice was heard in cleanup decisions that the department was making across the nuclear complex. But many of our communities are driven by and knowledgeable about their own missions and the nuclear projects that exist within their communities. And they are interested in seeing new nuclear development move forward. Many of them are already engaged, as you've heard today. And so we now have something called the New Nuclear Initiative, which is, again, why we're here, what this entire meeting is about. But one thing we want to ensure is that we take a more holistic approach to these kinds of conversations, because somebody at a community, at a 4-H club meeting, or at their local gathering town halls, somebody is bound to ask, when they're considering a new nuclear project, what about the waste? And that's a responsible question to ask. And so we wanted to take all of the discussion about new nuclear and make sure we really hit all of the challenges that are involved with this. And so this is conversation that we're having for the first time under the New Nuclear Initiative umbrella to address waste. And I am pleased to have a wonderful panel to address some of these questions. So I'm going to go down the line and let you introduce yourselves, and then we'll get started.
It's on? Okay. Hi, I'm Natalia Sarayeva. I'm with the U.S. Department of Energy, Office of Nuclear Energy. I wear several hats at this meeting. And the hat I'm wearing right now, I'll be representing our Office of Spent Nuclear Fuel Management, but I'm currently working at I spent many years supporting them and working with them and in there, but now I'm with the Office of Communications and Engagement as a lead for community engagement.
Hi folks, Bill Tech here, Mayor of City of Kemmer. Is this thing?
Yep.
Okay, it is working. I'm kind of here by default because the City of Kemmer that Brian and I come from, is the recipient of the TerraPower nuclear plant. We're really ecstatic for that, and just kind of here by default.
I'm Brian Muir, City Administrator of Kemmer. I work for the Mayor and the people of Kemmer and the City Council. It's been a pleasure to be a part of this project with TerraPower and Atrium coming to our community. So.
Hello, my name is Stefan Meyer. I'm with the IEA, responsible for radioactive waste disposal. And so yesterday, Kara, I guess, didn't quite know how to feel when she heard the feedback provided by the supply chain panel. I'll try to give you more of a mixed feelings today. One is a resolute, yes, we can. Don't worry. The other one is, yes, but you get a bit on with it right now before you turn on power, so you're sure that you can.
I'm Rod Baltzer, and I'm at the end of the panel, so it's definitely about waste. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Deep Isolation.
ECA, actually last year, we were announced as one of the awardees under DOE's consent-based siting consortia, which we're really excited about. We got $2 million. We're using $1 million to do work, bring communities together in bigger forums like this, and then we're going to give out the other half of the money to communities to go ahead and look at building capacity around issues of waste. So we are going to be awarding 3 very soon. We'll be announcing those next week, but we're super excited about offering those grants so that communities themselves can familiarize themselves with the issues and the concerns that exist within their community. In fact, Good Energy Collective, who is one of our sponsors, thank you, Good Energy Collective. Where is Jackie? Okay, well, when Jackie comes back in, she's also in other consortia. And so all of us as consortia are trying to help build capacity around these issues. So I will tell you that at the end, if you have questions about how you can get engaged with those consortia, please see me or anybody from Good Energy Collective. But that leads me to my first question, and that's for Natalia, who is part of this consent-based siting initiative. If you can kind of bring us up to date on where is the department, how is it going, and what do you foresee?
Okay. Well, it's a loaded question. I'll try to be brief. As many of you know, the Department of Energy is responsible by law for managing the spent nuclear fuel and high-level waste. And right now, we don't have a repository, we don't have a centralized interim storage facility. So the spent fuel is safely stored at the reactor sites where it was generated. So it is safe, again, it's stored safely and securely. However, that was not the solution that was intended, and it's not fair adjust to the communities around it because they became the host for the spent nuclear fuel without agreeing to do so. So we are working at the Department of Energy to establish an integrated waste management system that would include one or more federal interim storage facility, and federal interim means it's, you know, about 80 years old, maybe less, maybe more, but the licensing goes I think right now, and Ray might correct me if I'm wrong, but probably goes to like 40 years plus extensions. So in the meantime, we also working towards eventually having deep geological repositories by the law, because of the current stalemate, we are only working on the research and development, generic research and development for disposal. But we are actively working on finding solutions for storage that will allow us to take the spent fuel from the reactor sites, and also start addressing taxpayer liability, because not taking fuel back, as was directed by law, also means that there are liabilities that government paying, and it is over $10 billion in U.S. taxpayers' dollars, so all our taxpayers' dollars. So we are using a consent-based siting to identify willing and informed host communities to find the sites. And what it means is that's a process that really values the input from the communities and the communities' preferences, and also will be seeking informed consent. Right now, we're in the beginning of a long road, and right now we're in the phase of capacity building. We're not actively looking for any sites right now. And our consortia that Kara mentioned, and I'm so happy that Kara and Good Energy Collective are the 2 out of 12 teams represented here in this meeting, so you can engage more with them and learn more what it is and how to get involved. So consortia helping the department to have more dialogues with the interested public and help us with mutual learning. So that can help improve the decision-making process, improve our process going forward. I'll stop here. I should probably add that we expect the capacity building process to go for additional 2 years, and then after that phase, we expect to enter next phase, which will involve call for volunteers, and then going through different stages of site assessment, and eventually we'll sign a negotiated host agreement. So all those details would be available on our website, so also you can find me. There's also Stephanie Weir at the conference. I don't think she's here right now, but find her. She's working with our national labs who help us to with a lot of, there's a lot of things that goes into consent-based siting, and one of them is we use a lot of social science help to establish those fair and just processes. So if you're interested in learning more, yeah, we'll be around.
Thanks, Natalia, appreciate that. So we know that we have the mayor and the city administrator from Kemmerer, Wyoming, and I was super excited to throw them on the panel, which I'm sure they were like, wait a second. But the questions that I think are interesting and what we'd love to hear from you is, has the topic of nuclear waste come up in Kemmerer as TerraPower is coming in to replace the Naughton coal-fired power plant?
Yeah, thanks, Kara. My history actually with nuclear waste and safety and transport actually goes back to the late 80s, early 90s when I was on a state patrol. And of course, we're dealing with highway and public safety and transportation of fuel and waste fuel going to the WIP project down in New Mexico. So I have just enough information in me to confuse everybody, and but you know, whether it's you know, in a coffee shop, a grocery store, or wherever it is, you know, you get one of the major concerns with people is a safety aspect, and it's difficult to explain what the processes are. Having learned what I did here in the last day, a couple days, with the different kinds of fuel there are and different ways to store it, the drilling holes in what we saw this morning, that's pretty interesting, because at one time I was in the drilling industry also. But to try to explain to people that what they're going to do with it, of course I don't have any technical knowledge of how they're going to deal with this, but we're told by TerraPower and even representatives from the Department of Energy that come and talk to us that it's going to be stored safely. And it's hard to, when the public is concerned about how they're going to do that, well, it's, you know, we have, like I say, just enough information. But to explain to the public that with the government regulation and the safety regulations, we have to pretty much, it's like getting on an airplane. That safety factor is out of your hands once you get on the plane and sit down. So we have to rely on our government and the regulations, the NRC, that those safety factors are in place and it's going to be stored safely. But you always have those folks that are really concerned, and the detractors of nuclear, and they're pretty sure that our antelope and our deer and our elk are going to be glowing in the dark out there, which actually would make hunting at night a whole lot easier. But you know, so I think in the conversations I've had with quite a few people that I was able to put their minds somewhat at rest. And of course TerraPower has put on several town halls, and for a little bitty small town like we are, when you have a couple hundred people that flock into those things, there's a lot of questions. So that's pretty much the way I deal with it, just walking down the street or the coffee shop or the grocery store, and that's where I get my questions, very seldom at meetings. So
Thanks. Yeah, Brian, actually, and if you could expand on that a little bit, you know, what were the most common questions that you got? How often were these meetings being held, and did you have to ask for them? Or was TerraPower and Rocky Mountain Power, were they very, very forthcoming from the get-go?
Yep. Yeah, we've had several meetings both before and after getting the nuclear plant. And yes, Rocky Mountain Power, TerraPower, and Bechtel have been very helpful in answering those, as have been many of the meetings we've had with the federal agencies, including the Office of Economic and Community Development, the OECD, the EPA. We've had the folks from the Department of Energy, and we're communicating to them about the processes, and we've had timeline meetings multiple times. I mean, probably at least, I would say, at least four meetings with public input allowed as well. Safety does come up. Usually what they ask is, where is it going to be stored? And we tell them it's going to be stored on site for now. And where's the repository going to be? Is there going to be a repository? And we say we have confidence that the federal regulators are taking care of that. They've been communicating that that's their long-term plan. And another question we get is, once it is going to be transported, is it going to be safe to be transported? That's a question I think that we get periodically as well. Honestly, the number of questions is interesting. I actually received a lot more questions about, well, are they going to be using Wyoming uranium, and are we going to have jobs from our Wyoming uranium? We're going to get that going again. And interestingly enough, I was able to get some of the answers to those questions later on. To get Wyoming uranium to the HALEU stage, my understanding is it takes about 10 years. So I've been doing my best to answer them the best I can, but when we don't know the answers, we don't pretend to know, and we send them to the right people to get those answers more completely. And the public meetings have been extremely helpful and allayed a lot of people's concerns and fears. So
That's great. One thing we say at ECA very often is that funding should be provided, resources should be provided to communities so that you're not solely relying on the Department of Energy or those utilities to help answer those questions, but that you can hire a third-party expert that you feel has the community's best interests at heart, which I think is actually quite good advice. So, Natalia. So my next question actually is for Rod, and that is, Rod, deep boreholes are a potential answer for dealing with some waste. Does the political and legislative landscape exist for you all to do everything that you can do, and what would need to change?
Yeah, here in the U.S., the Nuclear Waste Policy Act basically says thou shalt only dispose at Yucca Mountain, Nevada. And so there's really no easy path forward without some kind of legislative change in the U.S. But having said that, there is a lot of things we could do prior to actual disposal. And some of that is actually, boreholes are relatively new, I guess, on the scene. They've actually been studied for decades, but they've become more popular recently. And so updating the regulations, because the regulations only really considered a mined repository, to make them more generic from a technology standpoint and more safety-based would be great. And also provide some of the funding for testing these new technologies, not have it be site-specific, but at least be ready so that if there was a desire for a community to move forward with disposal in a borehole, that everything's kind of in place once we got past some of the legislative aspects.
Thanks. And actually, I'm going to kick that over now to Stefan, because I know Stefan has a sweet spot for boreholes. Stefan, what can we learn from things that you're seeing from the perspective at the IAEA?
Okay, so maybe a little bit of international perspective, and to expand on what I said at the beginning, right? Yes, I have a sweet spot for deep borehole. That is a concept that deserves study. It requires study, just as Roger said. If you look around the world, and if you don't believe me, ask Mayor Sjöberg back there from Sweden, right? Disposal of any type of radioactive waste has been done in many places around the planet. It can be done. That goes for rad waste that we know that exists today, spent fuel that is somewhere in storage. I had asked in the previous panel, what with these innovative fuels, do we know enough about their properties? So here, Svetlana reassured me, said there are working groups at DOE that ensure that a new reactor only gets licensed if the DOE is sure that eventually they'll be able to take possession and manage that. So that is reassuring. Unfortunately, a lot of these are proprietary, so it is not general public knowledge what the properties of these fuels will be, as is today the conventional light water reactor fuels. So the position of IEA, it's a little bit uneasy because we can't provide an honest answer. We don't know what it's going to be. We have to trust on the national organizations to do the right thing. In a country with such a very robust and long history in nuclear as is the United States, it's easy to have that confidence looking from outside. There's many other countries on this planet in which similar technologies are also being considered for deployment. There, we are in a more difficult position to, let's say, if we're asked to make comments like this, or statements, well, is this all fine? Do we have waste assurance? Do we have fuel assurance? And we have to say, well, your national institutions have to be competent in place and knowledgeable about what is coming their way to put in place the adequate management systems. So, yeah.
Thank you. This is a question for the whole panel. The issue of risk and trust comes up all the time in waste discussions. And so for each of you, how do you balance risk? I remember being in a meeting at WIP, and the community around there said, we understand the risk, and we understand it in a way that makes us feel confident that we want to move forward. How do we get to that point? How do you balance the way that people think things are risky? And what are the opportunities that you've found for that conversation, especially in Kemmerer? How do you get over the risk and accept that there's some risk, but balance that out with the opportunities? So anybody who wants to go first can take it.
Okay, well, that's a tough one to answer. We're just talking about the risk of storing fuel and how people think about it, but in a small town like ours, 2,500, and next door is Diamondville, that is another 700 people, so it's a very small community, and the biggest risk that most people see is the growth of our community. And it's very difficult, the people my age and older, and even some younger, that are really worried that their small town is going to go away. The Cowboy State Daily seems to think that we're going to have 12,000 people in Kemmerer. I don't think that's ever going to come to fruition. Even in our oil field energy days, it was still only about 6,000, and that's my thoughts. So, to deal with that and explain to people that, this is what the projections are, and though we hope that coal never actually goes away, we're hoping that we're not going to be burning it in a power plant. We have other companies that are coming to the area because there's going to be coal available to turn the coal into other things, such as hydrogen, carbon capture, and those sort of things, and ammonia. So the biggest risk, I don't think the community at large is really worried about the overall power plant, the nuclear plant going in. Their biggest thing is that our little town is going to change, and it is. And in order to, I guess one of the things that was important to me when I decided to run for position of mayor is 2 years before that we found out that our coal plant was going down, and it was, what in the world are we going to do for jobs here? And then along come TerraPower, and that kind of went away. So you just grasp what you have and in order to provide jobs for our children, our grandchildren, and so on, the town has to grow, and it has to prosper, and it has to change, and you just need to get a hold of that and do your best to control that. But it's just going to happen, and people are kind of embracing that. And with some of the community studies that we've done, the majority, 70 to 80% of the community was in favor of what we're doing here. And that was really encouraging. The small number of detractors that we had are such a small voice that it really hasn't been an issue. But I'll talk to anybody and try to explain to them what is going on. And I think we've handled that pretty well, and I don't think overall that the community is really overly concerned about that.
Thanks, Mayor. I think I'll just kind of dovetail off of what he was saying. I concur. I would just say that the perception overall from, and maybe part of this is because of my optimistic nature, but a lot more opportunities and risks here, and the risks for safety, just to give you context, it's about 6 miles south of the city where this is going in, and the wind tends to blow the other way, not towards the city anyway, coming from the west. So there's not a lot, and it's in a very remote area, so folks are. I think there's a high energy IQ in our community as well. When Bill Gates came to visit us, that was another meeting of a meeting that was very helpful. He came to talk to all the stakeholders, state legislatures, as well as local leaders and others, and economic folks. And he said that you guys have a really good energy IQ, and you know energy, and the people in our community really know, even the folks on the front lines at the coal mine, they know what a megawatt is, and they know how much coal needs to be converted to a megawatt. And they have very sound technical understanding and a good feeling for risk. They're not afraid of change in that regard technically. Opportunity-wise, this became, for us, an opportunity to think differently, to think outside the box. I was inspired when I came to this conference and saw the picture of JFK out there, and I thought, he got everybody in the country thinking we can get to the moon. And I don't know that doing this is going to be as hard as it is to get to the moon, but we have 220 coal mine jobs. Okay, 2025, 60% of the coal is going to be gone on the contracts, because Rocky Mountain Power's IRP has it ending 2025. So we've got 3 coal-fired power plants. One's already been converted to natural gas. It'll go until 2036. The other 2 are going to be converted to natural gas temporarily, I think, until they can get all the nuclear. We're hoping not just for one nuclear plant, but for a second one. I think that's what, reading between the lines, I think that's where we're going to end up. We're going to end up with 200 nuclear permanent jobs, plus another 25 if we get a second nuclear there. So I think that's kind of fueling a little bit more optimism. There's a plan. We actually are thankful that we had an EDA grant to help us create a strategic plan that actually did have the vision to put in nuclear power into the mix. 3 to 5 years, that plan was released, and we have a website. You can go check it out. Invest Kemmer Diamondville. It has the strategic plan, all the other things we were able to do with the EDA grant to help prepare our community and our housing folks that are coming. We have all kinds of resources up there on Invest Kemmer Diamondville. It's been an opportunity as well for us to join together with our Diamondville colleagues. We've got to work together on this, and sometimes there's been some division in the past between the 2 communities. So 3 to 5 years, was our forecast in 2020 to get nuclear. It wasn't our highest priority goal. We didn't think it was realistic as much as some of the other goals, but it's risen to the top, of course, fortuitously. We competed with 3 other Wyoming communities to get this nuclear site, and we've had over I think majority, I think it was 85% think that there's going to be good economic benefit, and about, almost 80 think it's safe, too. They see it as a safe thing. So right now, today, there's, Bill Gates is coming again. I didn't mention that. He's coming again June 10th to our community to do the groundbreaking. I got okay from the TerraPower to share that with you all, to do a groundbreaking to show us their support of our community just at the site. So today, you go up to the TerraPower website, there's 8 new jobs working for TerraPower with folks with nuclear experience living in Kemmer right now. If you go up to the website, look at careers. There's also 3 folks in Bechtel that we met just the other day. Public safety was being trained on how to do emergency response and all of that. But both Bechtel and TerraPower were there communicating with us, assuring us that they had plans to take care of the safety in our community. But three of the folks that I met, permanent employees with Bechtel, who's building the plant. So again, I think the mayor said it well, the biggest risk is losing our economy and our way of life, our families, and their multi-generational energy families. In my mind, I was really appreciative, by the way, when the folks from Piketon, Ohio, spoke yesterday, that we have a plan. That was probably the biggest risk out of the gate, right? Well, we can't buy uranium from Russia anymore. Okay, what are we going to do? And they made it happen. We appreciate that things are going on in Piketon, Ohio. Piketon, Ohio, by the way, has already reached out to me. Their city manager called me, hey, we need to come visit each other's sites and share. I like that communication. So I hope that in the housing, trying to provide enough, I'm spending most of my time now trying to provide housing opportunities for not only the permanent workers, but the 1,600 plus temporary workers that are coming to our community.
And I can add that it's really absolutely crucial that we meet communities where they are, and before having a discussion about risk, we listen and that we understand what do the risk mean to the community, what are the risks concerning them, is it safety, is it the growth of the town, or what else? And there is no community that is one size fits all. So, and this is also what we are doing with also consortium help, is to help us to understand better the breadth of the different issues that we need to address and be ready to address in those conversations. And it's a tricky balance, of course, of like technical details and the social aspects of it. And again, the balance really depends on where you are.
Rod, I know that Deep Isolation has also done a lot of community outreach. So how are issues of risk raised and how are they responded to?
Yeah, we've done a couple of field tests, and so we went into the community where we were going to do this test and was talking to the county elected official and said, we're bringing this non-radioactive steel canister into a testing site that's fully licensed, and we're going to do this work, and we just wanted to tell you about this. And he kind of looks at me across the desk and he goes, why are you really here? And I said, well, because the Department of Energy tried this same test in the Dakotas a few years ago, and nobody knew about it, and the community went crazy when they found out through the paper about it, and we want to make sure somebody knows about this up front. And he goes, okay, I really appreciate that. And he came out and watched the test we did. We had about 60 people out there who watched it. Related specifically to risk, it's interesting because we've got, I'll call it oil and gas, the drilling risk for a borehole, and then we've got that nuclear waste and handling risk as well. And so when you're talking to people in the nuclear industry and we handle this waste, we put it into storage, we transport it, and it's very, very safe. And they're not too worried about it, but oil and gas they don't know anything about, and so there's lots of risks they want to know about on that aspect. The drilling guys are exactly the opposite. They're like, oh my gosh, why are you even testing this? We do this every day. This is just kind of stupid. But the nuclear aspects are like, well, how different is this than our oil and gas logging sources and whatnot? So it's interesting. It's great to get that discussion, and I think that really helps reduce the risk when people realize that there are experts, even in these communities, that have some experience with that.
Thanks. Stefan, do you have any lessons learned you can share in terms of how you all have heard about and addressed perceptions of risk?
Well, that's Personally, not many. It's a field of study. Risk communication is often goes along with specifically waste management and disposal. Rather, I like to thank both representatives from Camera here, because when you raised that issue of waste and risk, I was a bit worried to say how do we now get into the discussion of risk-informed assessments and the underlying science and all that, because that's not an easy feat. And I'd really like to thank you first that you brought it down to the type of risk that seemed to matter to you in the community, and that you delegate some of the underlying scientific studies to different entities you trust and your independent experts. And just clarify what matters to you is the risk of losing jobs, but also the risk of, will I recognize my community? I never heard of that one before, so thanks for teaching me something. And then finally, the greatest statement you made is, it's really a value analysis. It's not, is a risk, yes, there's a risk, it's small, but I don't care, I don't want it because there's a risk. It's like, yes, of course, there is one, there always is one, but on balance with the benefits and everything it does for our community in the future of the survival of the community, we can live with that, we can almost even neglect that, right? Because it's a value analysis that we're looking at. So that I appreciate in this conversation. Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, I wasn't surprised to hear transportation perhaps came up, and I think that's an area where we could all do a better job of talking about the safe transportation record that exists in the United States. And we've been moving nuclear waste across the country for a very long time, very safely. And it seems to be transportation always comes up, but we don't always come back immediately with that experience that we've had successfully. In your opinion, this is a tough question for this room, but do you think that if we don't address waste and get waste management moving in a plan that goes forward, that it's going to inhibit new nuclear development? Who wants to take that one?
I'll start. So it's interesting because we've got waste. We've got the legacy fleet that's out there. It's all in storage, safe, as you've noted. And it hasn't really mattered too much, I don't think. The new advanced reactors, there's a lot of excitement about that, et cetera. But it does seem that waste keeps coming up as like one of the questions. When we looked at Natalia and the consent-based siting, trying to do a consolidated interim storage facility, you know, one of the concerns by the states was, what's the disposal solution? This seems like it's, you know, disposal in effect above ground, and that's not where you want to dispose of waste. It should be deep below ground. And so I do think it would provide a better pathway if we could address that question now. We've got a grant through ARPA-E, and that's to develop a universal waste canister and waste acceptance criteria for advanced reactor waste. So you can store it, transport it, dispose it to a mine or a borehole. And I think this is important so that we don't repackage it. We know where it can go, and we've got options. So if you want to transport it out of your community, you can. If you want to dispose of it in that community and not transport it because that's something you don't like, you can, and give you that optionality and flexibility through it.
Thank you.
Yep. If I can I add to this? So thanks very much, Rod. Just follow on to that. Yeah, I'm very disappointed. Really, I am. I expected. You know, yesterday Eric got his moment of, well, 3 Mile Island, right? And I expected my moment, but what with the waste? And I didn't get it yet. Not that strongly. And coming here, I assume that would be one of the 2 big issues, concerns. But I think taking the positive approach like you just did is the right way. I have the benefit of having witnessed many programs in many countries. And so I can say, yes, all existing radioactive waste can be safely managed. There are disposal solutions that have been studied in which we can have confidence that they can be replicated in other countries given the appropriate framework, given the appropriate resources and the competence that's needed to do that. I'll add the little caveat, given that there is some confidentiality and proprietary information around new fuels, it's more difficult to make such a confident statement, at least to me. It's reassuring to me if someone like Natalia from the DOE says, well, we have a group and we will not, you know, support a license, we not support turning it on unless we are sure that one day we can take possession, we'll take that responsibility. So maybe, but that's the greatest lesson that we learned, we tried to convey from the past 60 years of nuclear. is address this question before you start, because today it took a very long time to move from a very negative perception of there's all this legacy, and it just gives nuclear such a bad name. It's a huge reputational damage, to gradually cleaning it up and cleaning up that and improving on that reputational damage and moving into the positive. Stay in the positive, plan for the future, and provide for this before you start.
Thank you. Talia?
Yeah, so the advanced reactor development deployment will continue, right? But I agree with the previous speakers that we absolutely need the backend solution, which would allow us for more robust system, more flexibility, and eventually cost and schedule savings. So at the department, we are responsible for eventually taking this what is called title for spent nuclear fuel, right? So basically, we have to take the fuel when we have the capabilities to do so, right? And we by law are required to have what is called standard contract with between the reactor operators and DOE, right? That basically agreement that spells out all the terms for the operator managing spent nuclear fuel until it's taken by the department, right? So the spent nuclear fuel is safely and securely stored where it is right now, right? For the advanced reactors, it also have to be and will be safely stored, because we need to sign the standard contract with them, and we have to understand and be sure, and there's a correlation with the licensing process, because there's requirements to have a good faith letter before the construction permit and sign contract before operation license is granted. So there are lots of summarizing what I'm trying to say, there are lots of check and balances to make sure it is safe and secure. But the faster we can have, or the sooner we can have the longer-term solution, the better.
Ryan?
Mary? Go ahead, Mary.
When you do start talking about nuclear with local folks, of course, the first thing that comes to their mind is 3 Mile Island, Fukushima, Chernobyl. And I usually counter with that with all of those incidences being attributable to human error. And I'm hoping with the technology that it's going into this Natrium plant that we're going to be able to eliminate a lot of that. And I usually counter those 3 examples that folks remember with the fact that starting in 1954, when the United States commissioned the first nuclear submarine, the USS Nautilus, and all of our aircraft carriers that are around the world constantly, they run on nuclear, and it's safe. And what's going to come into our community, I truly believe is going to be safe. And that usually dispels some of those anxieties that the community has. And with my limited knowledge of nuclear and listening to everybody on these panels that have been here, I don't know squat.
Thanks, Mayor. I think this is really also another way to look at this question is a public relations kind of question. And I think I go back to W. Edwards Deming, the father of TQM, Total Quality Management. He said, and he's the one that came up with the mantra of quality is meeting or exceeding customers' expectations. And I think we have a lot of expectations in the community and the worldwide community about making sure everything's safe that we're doing. And so I think we need to improve the quality of our communications when we're talking about nuclear safety and all of this, and also the quantity of those communications. And we need to be accurate with the stories that we're telling them with technical information that supports what we're saying. The mayor and I this is a friendly audience here, of course, when it comes to safety of nuclear, but we get questions all the time, ever since we got announced to get this power plant, from reporters from all kinds of different political bents and on this political spectrum. And so we need the information, the technical information, and the people to send people to get the accurate answer, so that we're not saying something that, you know, to the press, for example, that it's going to cause us some issues. So anyway.
Yeah, and you know, I'll add to that you know, God forbid should something happen, because we're going to be the ones that get blamed for it. And I'm going to point at Brian and said he did it.
You raise a good point, and by the way, I would like to invite anybody who has any questions to please come up to a mic. But in the interim, you raise an interesting point, which is you need to trust who's delivering that information. And we have seen in the past, especially around the back end of the fuel cycle, that there isn't a lot of trust in the U.S. government. And, you know, going back to Gerben's video yesterday and what they did in the Netherlands, there is a very high degree of trust in their government. How can we build trust in our government that we're not going to keep going at this in fits and starts, but rather we're going to commit to moving forward and addressing this issue?
I can start by saying how we're trying to do it, and I would be really interested to hear from the communities of what the additional approaches we could take. So yeah, there's no, the trust was broken, and the consent-based siting will go at the pace of trust. So we absolutely have to reestablish that. We're trying to do it through, again, innovative approaches, and as you said, not everybody trusts the government, and experts from the labs, and it's fine. So this is why we're using the wealth of our social science expertise to come up with different options of how we can do it. And again, there is no one-size-fits-all approach. And again, one more plug for our consortia is what we're trying to do is to get deeper in those issues, better understand that, and also ask communities through the consortia provide some resources, including the information, including like grants and funding, so communities can learn on their own terms. So in the long run, it will be a combination of the information provided by the department, by other entities, but also the opportunity for interested communities to figure out how they want to learn it, and if they want to hire their own experts. So subject to congressional appropriations, of course, because that's how we live. But in our consent-based siting process and roadmap, we anticipate that we would be providing the funding so the communities would be able to obtain their own knowledge, experts, etc.
Thanks.
Can I add one more thing, Kara?
Please, please do.
You know, when it comes to risk and opportunity, I'll say that communities of Kemmer, Diamondville were founded in the late 1800s, early 1900s on coal. And I mean, that's energy. And then we eventually evolved into drilling, into oil and gas. And, you know, what we've developed here, and with a lot of people, especially our younger generation, I think there's a certain amount of enthusiasm with one more time with nuclear here, a new form of energy, for us anyway, that there's a certain amount of excitement that one more thing, we're on a cusp of a new form of energy in our communities, and I think there's a certain amount of enthusiasm and pride in that, and that's really heartwarming.
Anybody else want to take on the how do we build trust?
Keep your trust is keeping your promises and exceeding expectations. I just say, I mean, wow, I didn't expect that they would anticipate that question, anticipating a question and answering it ahead of the time that somebody might have.
I also think it's interesting because clearly you guys are trusted in your community, but does that trust extend all the way up to everyone that needs to be trusted? The example in the Dakotas was a really good one. No radioactive material was going to be involved in those tests, and just nobody believed it, and that it was over. Chuck?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. No.
Okay. Yes, my question for Natalie. You know, we've been debating now for many, many years the definition of high-level waste and how changing that could improve the situation for nuclear waste around the country, to move it more quickly to deposit repositories that can take that lower level classification of waste. And it seems like we just keep talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. You know, we've identified billions of dollars that could be saved for the Department of Energy in the country if we did just something simple as change the definition of high-level waste, which I think the IAEA uses for their waste classification. So why is it so difficult to get that done and get that in progress?
All right, so this is a little bit outside of my wheelhouse, but but the definition of spent nuclear fuel and high-level waste, and as all other requirements that we live under right now, come from the Nuclear Waste Policy Act. So everybody recognizes that we absolutely need some updates to the legislation to move forward to many fronts, and there were studies, and I think EM looked at the reclassification as well. So I might need to put you in touch with the right experts, so I'll talk with you after the panel.
I just want to add on to that. The beauty, I guess, of borehole disposal is that even if you do get that waste reclassified, maybe it doesn't need to be disposed of as high-level waste, but it could be disposed of a little shallower or a little different formation, and that's where the modularity and the customization of a borehole field may come in, that that waste can have more disposal options, I guess, open up if it goes through something like that. And we're looking at that with like some of the reprocessing companies and things like that as well.
And we've heard a lot about reprocessing over the last couple of days. And obviously, the Nuclear Waste Policy Act does talk about retrievability. And so maybe, Rob, this is a question for you. How would reprocessing in the U.S., how would that impact the waste side of the coin? And what is the retrievability aspects that you all offer?
So, boy, somebody's going to correct me, I'm certain, but I believe if it gets reprocessed and you use that as much as you can, and you've got that waste incidental to reprocessing, it does not need to be retrieved. So this would be more applicable to like transuranic waste at True. You don't have any retrieval requirements for that. For some of the spent fuel and whatnot, we've traditionally associated with a mined repository that you would be able to retrieve it during the operating life of that mine, roughly 50 years or so. And so that's what we're effectively trying to build into our process right now, because we don't know, because those regulations haven't been updated. But realistically, our borehole facilities probably going to, each borehole is probably only going to be open a year or two, depending on those waste acceptance and how much you're putting in there. So do you need to keep it open that long? Should you keep it open that long? Because it'll be a lot more difficult to steal that waste out of there if you close it. It'll be safer if you close it. So shouldn't you close that as soon as you can? But you also want to have that waste confidence that, yes, that facility is performing as you expected. So there's still some issues to be addressed through that, but overall, you know, retrievability is definitely something we've built in. It's a regulatory requirement, and we hope that gets a little more clarification as we go through this process.
Great, thanks. Stefan?
Happy to add to that. So there's two parts to your question, right? The first one was more on reprocessing. So it wouldn't fundamentally change the disposal needs if we consider reprocessing as it's been done today in the world with a Purex process. For example, you get vitrified high-level waste instead of spent fuel, and you get then additional waste from that reprocessing process. on retrievability, so that this is a requirement that has established itself over the past decades for mine geologic disposals, most of the one or the projects I'm aware of around the world. There may be many good reasons and good arguments for that in the context of a mine geologic disposal. If we're studying innovative disposal concepts like a deep borehole, I think it's important to also reassess the entire framework that surrounds such a concept. So the conventional requirements that were used, like for mine DGR, like monitoring, retrievability, others maybe, they were developed over the decades for a reason in that concept, and it's important to reassess if those same reasons, and so the same intent applies for a different concept like deep borehole, or if the safety strategy for that concept deserves a different approach and a different set of framework. So we've only just begun looking at this at IEA as well, because other countries ask similar questions. There's no answers yet. It deserves study. I think we need to invest in some studies to gain clarity. And I think, as you just said, parallel to this, the national frameworks have to be evaluated, analyzed. That takes time. But to have the right frameworks in place, depending on what you do, reprocessing or not, one type of disposal concept or another. Everything has to fit.
Thank you. It's that back to that integrated waste management system, isn't it? A holistic approach. I wanted to ask you to join me in thanking our panelists. And we will go ahead and call up the next panel.
Show you the town. Okay. It was the night before.